Hello grade 9s, welcome to today's Maths Lit video lesson. I hope you guys are well, and I see not many of you guys are watching the videos. Maybe it's a little bit too much, us going back to school and the volume of work increasing, the volume of problems increasing, and at the same time the difficulty is increasing with each section. So I'm going to go at a slightly slower pace this week, just to give you guys a little bit of a chance to catch up. And I'm going to be doing some of the homework solutions on the board. So I would suggest that you attempt these problems and then check the answers and then try and write down these problems somewhere in your books. Now, I don't have the ability to check your homework all the time, so you guys need to be responsible enough to do this. So I'm going to go over the solutions for the homework given out last week. It's the revision exercise on page 283. And we're going to look at question 1 and 2. So these questions relate to the bar graph, double bar graph, histogram, and pie chart. So let's get started. So I've copied down the table from question 1a. And this is your classic pie chart problem. And the first thing to do when drawing a pie chart is to get all the information laid out. So we have this grocery store, and this customer, Simpiwe, is buying a bunch of basic goods: rice, flour, milk, butter, and bread. And they want to visually represent all of his purchases as a pie chart. So these are his groceries. This is the amount that he spends. So the first thing we need to do is find the total spending. Then we get each different commodity, we get it as a proportion of the total. So when you add up all of these numbers, we get a total of 60, and then each of these is a proportion, a fraction of the 60. So for example, the rice will be 9 Rand out of the 60 Rand spent. Flour will be 5.5 Rand out of the 60 Rand, and so on and so forth. So if we want to determine the angles for each of the sectors in our pie, if we want to work out these angles, how can we relate these proportions? So we know that a circle has 360 degrees. So if we're looking at a relationship between this total 60 and 360, all we need to do is multiply by 6. So then we would multiply each of these by 6 to get the angle. So I'm just going to fill that in quickly. So I filled in all the angles here. You can just double check. 9 times 6 is 54, 5.5 times 6 is 33, and so on and so forth. So these will be the angles for each of our sectors. We can see that the biggest one is for butter at 135 degrees. The smallest one is going to be for flour. That's a segment with 33 degrees. So lastly, we just need to get the related percentages. So the percentage is the fraction, the proportion spent, and we just multiply that fraction by 100. So for example, if we're working out the percentage for rice, we would take the fraction 9 out of 60 and times it by 100. And I get 15% on the dot. Okay, then if we look at flour, we have 5.5 divided by 60 times 100. And I get 9.17. So I'm just going to round that to 9. And we can progress this way. I'll fill in the rest of the values. So I've rounded all of these percentages to the nearest unit. and if we add them all up, we should get a total of 100. Now, for the actual plotting of the pie chart, I'm not going to do it here because I don't have a protractor, and the diagram is given in the back of the textbook, the answer. It's on page 360, and you can see how they've drawn it here. So what you can do is just double check using your protractor, check that the sizes of the angles for each segment match the angles over here, and that the percentages also match for each commodity. So let's move on to 1b. So question 1b is asking us to use a broken line graph to represent the data in the table. So I've duplicated that table over here, and before we start plotting this thing, it's nice to try and have an idea about what's going on, what we're going to do with the axes, and what our scales on each axis will be. So I'm going to put time on the horizontal axis. So remember, horizontal is flat, and I want time to be there. Usually time would go on the horizontal, and temperature would depend on time. Okay, so in this case we have time of day in hours, and the temperature depends on what time it is. So we can see that early in the morning at 7 there's a low temperature, and as we progress towards noon there's higher temperatures. Okay, so I'm going to have time as the independent and temperature as the dependent. So lastly, we need to think about what scale we're going to be using. Time goes up in 2-hour intervals. So on this axis we go up in 2s, and if we look at temperature, we see that there's a maximum value of 25 and a minimum value of 10. So we just must make sure that our range goes from 10 to 25. So I'm going to put down everything that we discussed regarding the table onto the graph. So we have our two axes. We said that we'd let time be the independent variable on the horizontal, and the unit is hours. On the vertical, we have temperature, and the unit is degrees centigrade. So our time of day went up in increments of 2. So we start off here at 7 o'clock. So we're going to put 0700, and then we go up in 2. So it's 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19. And our final time is 7 in the evening. So for our vertical axis, I'm going to split it up into 5s. So we go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. 25 was our maximum temperature. Okay, now that we've got this, we just need to plug in the values. We've got 7 o'clock as 10, so we go 5, 10, our first point is there. Then we've got 9 o'clock as 15, so 5 higher than 10. Next, 11 is 20. Then we've got 2 25s. 22. So 22 is a little bit tricky. 22 and a half lies directly between 20 and 25. So you can guesstimate it to be slightly below half. And our last value is 18. 18 is also not a multiple of 5. So we'll just guesstimate 20 is here and just a little bit lower than that. Okay, so we've got all of our points, but we're not done yet because this question asks for a broken line graph. So we need to join all these dots with straight lines. And lastly, this type of graph needs a heading. So we can put something up here, maybe call it broken line graph showing how temperature varies with time of day. Okay, so all of these things are important. You get a mark for the main heading, a mark for each of the axis labels, and that's already 3 marks. This question counts for a total of 5 marks, so I think you get quite a bit just by correct labeling and descriptions, and the actual plotting of the points might only count 2 marks. Now on to question 2, I'll read it quickly. It says the results of the last maths test that the grade 9s wrote are given in the following table. So there's quite a bit of data here. We can see in this table the row has 10 and the column has 6. So there's a total of 6 times 10, which is 60 marks. So we need to handle this data somehow. We can't let the data handle us. And this question is asking, complete the frequency table for part A, and part B is draw a histogram to represent the data. So before I do any frequency tables, I just want to arrange this data in order using a stem and leaf plot. So I've put down my stem over here. Remember, the stems are our tens digits, so we go for our lowest marks are in the 20s and our highest marks are in the 90s. So I'm just going to fill in some of the leaves, and I'm just going to do the first 2 columns, and then I'll pause the video and fill in the rest. So the first column starts 64, 81, 51, etc. The second column starts 45, 56, 28. Okay, so let's plug in 64. There's our 60, and our unit is 4. We've got 81, 51, 20, 70, 61. So let's just check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's the first column. Let's move on to the next one. 45. 56, 28, that's far on this side, 74, 63, 1, 2, 3, and 77. Okay, so for this kind of table, there's quite a few data points, so make it nice and big. And also, it's going to be easier on the exam paper where the lines can order everything nicely. So I'm just going to pause the video and fill in the rest. So I've completed my stem and leaf plot over here for all 60 values. It didn't take very long, it's about 4 minutes. And as a last double check, I just want to look at the frequencies for each of these tens. So for example, with the marks in the 20s, we had a 20%, 22%, 23%, and 28%. So there were 4 values in the 20s. Similarly, for the 30s, there was 39%, 39%. So there were 2 values. And I'm just counting the frequencies for each one. And I got these values over here, 4, 2, 5, 10, 20, 10, 5, and 4. And you can double check if you add all of these values, we get back to 60. So if your total doesn't give you 60, you'll know that you maybe forgot a value over here, or you added one too many. And these totals over here are going to be used in part 2a, the frequency table. So here is our frequency table. We've got 20 to 29, 30 to 39, and those are our percentages. So the first one is in the 20s, the second is the 30s, and so on until we get to the 90s. So I'm just going to copy down our tally from the stem and leaf plots. So for the 20s, 20 to 29, we had 4 people. 30 to 39, we had a 39 and a 39, so 2 people, and so on and so forth. So lastly, we need to plot this data on a histogram. Remember, histogram deals with continuous data. So these percentages are actually continuous data because they can involve fractions. So we can get like 39.5% or 28.5%. It just so happens though that the data that's given here in the textbook only has whole numbers. So chances are they got something like 63.9% and they rounded it to 64%. Okay, so the data in the table has probably been rounded, but that doesn't mean that it's not continuous. We can still get fractions and therefore we can plot it on a histogram. So just remember, for a histogram, we have our intervals on the horizontal and we have our frequencies on the vertical. And then for the scale, for the horizontal, I'm just going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 intervals. And for the frequency, we have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 20. So I'm probably just going to go up to 25. So I've laid out the axes for our histogram over here. We said we'd have the horizontal axis as our intervals. So we've got 8 equal intervals, the first one being 20 to 29%, the second 30 to 39%, and so on and so forth, till we get to the last interval, 90 to 100%. Remember, this axis needs a label, and it marks percentage. For the vertical axis, we have frequency, and the highest frequency was 20. So I've just made my intervals go up in 5s. So 5, 10, 15, 20, up to 25. And don't forget that all of these representations have to have a heading. So I've just put there maths test marks. So once we've laid everything out, we can just plug and play. For the first interval, 20 to 29, we had a frequency of 4. So 4 is just below 5. 30 to 39%, what is a frequency of 2. So midway between 0 and 5 is 2.5. So we can say 2 should just lie a little bit below that. 40 to 49 is 5 on the dot. Then the next one is 10. Then we get 20, 10, 5, and 4. And then we're pretty much done. So thanks guys, thanks for watching if you are, and if you guys are struggling, please let me know. Please let me also know about the pace at which we're going. I don't want anybody to fall behind, especially when we have a class of only 4 people. So guys, thanks, take care, and all the best.